an original.
From Story Studio Network.
I'm Tom Hoppe, and I'm your host of the Most Painful Podcast. As we start Season 7, I would like to thank you, the listeners from Canada, the US, Europe, and the UK for your support of this show. Your feedback has helped develop the show and define the topics that are important to you. On Season 6, we talked to Dr. Sun about arthritis, Dr. Vada Bencour on postmenopausal health, and Dr. Andrea Ferlin discussing strategies to work with your doctor when they do not understand your chronic pain. In Season 7, we'll continue to bring you the best evidence-based knowledge to help you with your health, such as high-intensity interval training exercise snacks, behavioral change, how to make those life changes last, and many more great topics, so subscribe to the show to get the most up-to-date episodes. Tinnitus impacts many people and has negative impact on their quality of life. Today on the show, I'm joined by Dr. Philippe Fournier, who's a professor at Laval University doing research on tinnitus, and he's going to discuss the latest research they've been working on for tinnitus. Philippe, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and like we said offline, you got great reviews on the presentation you did at the CPCOE Health Forum and on tinnitus. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion. So I know many people suffer in tinnitus, including myself. So maybe you can just start by providing a quick background, I guess, on what tinnitus is and how it can be caused.
Tinnitus is usually defined as a sound that is heard by someone without any external sound source. So there's no sound source within the environment or within the body. So usually it is described as ringing or buzzing in the ears, or one ear, two ears, or in the head. Basically, there's probably different types of tinnitus. So we know there is different types of tinnitus. So there is potential different causes, but mostly tinnitus is linked to some level of hearing damage, hearing loss. And basically, the brain tries to compensate for that hearing loss and generates the sound. So it's a kind of a phantom sound, if you like.
Now, I know you talked about hearing loss, but I've also, I'm curious about this one because I have read, especially with military members, they may not experience hearing loss, but due to concussions or blast injuries, they can get tinnitus or tinnitus. Is that correct as well?
It is. There's many different causes of tinnitus. So one of the main causes is noise exposure. So when you're in military, you're exposed to various sources of noise. We can think about transportation. We can think about generators within camps that are noisy. And we can also think about different impulsive noise that people are exposed to, gunshot, explosion, which have high peaks, or even blast. And it's true that sometimes when military get tested for hearing loss, where they are tested in the booth and they're asked to detect very faint sounds, we don't see an hearing loss, so we don't see a change in hearing threshold, so the detection of small sounds. But it doesn't mean that because the hearing threshold are normal, that the hearing apparatus, that the inner ear wasn't affected by the blast, by the constant noise. So it needs a lot of damage before you see a hearing threshold change. But we mostly think that even though there's no change in the clinical standard test, there is damage in the ear that is triggering the tinnitus in every of those different types of aspect that you talked about. So the blast or the head concussion.
So what have you, maybe you can tell us what you've been working on and what you have found out.
In my experience as a researcher, so I've been doing research in the last 20 years. So I've started as an undergrad at Université de Montréal in Sylvie Hébert's lab. So I was a young student, and my first research project on hearing was about the link between stress and tinnitus. So it was a project led by Sylvie and her lab in that time. And we were interested to see if cortisol, a hormone of stress, could explain variation in tinnitus. So if you're more stressed, does your tinnitus goes up, and is it linked to cortisol level in your body, for example? So that was my first research project in tinnitus, and then since that first experience, I've done research on different evaluation tools, so trying to estimate, validate, objectivate the perception of tinnitus in an individual during my PhD. Then I moved to Marseille in Arnaud Norella's lab for 6 years, and we studied different psychoacoustic measures, so how we can potentially mask tinnitus, suppress it with sound stimulation. So is it possible to create a sound stimulation that could suppress tinnitus for long periods of times, minutes to hours to even days? And now we're working on different other aspects. So for example, other modalities to try to suppress tinnitus. For example, some people report that moving their jaw or moving their eyes or moving their head can modulate their tinnitus. So what is the interaction? Can we stimulate the head and the face and suppress tinnitus and combine it with auditory stimulation, for example? So we're looking at different aspects from evaluation to trying to understand the mechanisms that are behind tinnitus, but also on treatment. So we're working on all of those aspects in my lab.
There's a couple questions I'd have out of that, but when you're talking about stress, I find that interesting because I know when I spoke to the specialist, out of Hotel Dieu in Kingston years ago, he said really, it does impact apparently people that are type A personalities and high stress more than somebody else. So basically telling me to relax, which is hard to do, but or he said change your personality. But I find it interesting that you talk about stress. So was there a correlation between the two?
There is a link. We don't completely understand it physiologically. There's a lot of receptor for stress hormone in the ear. And we don't really know what's their role. And there's a lot of hypotheses regarding that. Maybe the stress hormone is there because if there's a danger, when we were in the prehistoric years, we were chasing and we were chased by animals. Maybe that this hormone of stress could heighten our ability to detect sounds, to survive. So there's a lot of hypotheses there. There is a link with tinnitus. We don't completely understand it, how it completely modulates. Sylvie Hébert is one of the researcher in the world who've studied the link between stress and tinnitus the most. And she has found that it has an impact. It can explain some aspect of modulation of tinnitus, but it doesn't explain everything. It's true. And there is also that link with stress and stressful events. Some people says their tinnitus started after a stressful event. So it didn't start after a noise trauma or a blast. It started after for example, a divorce or a very stressful event with financial struggle, for example. So there is some kind of link, but it's still not completely clear, the link between the two.
So then are you saying it's neurological, like connected to the brain in a sense, or is it?
It surely
I mean,
is.
I understand hearing is connected to the brain. I get that in a sense that, if you're saying it could be blast injury, it could be stress, it could be a head concussion, but it's still, from what I'm hearing, it still doesn't provide a definitive answer that that's exactly what causes tinnitus, right? It's kind of an unknown, or is
it's probably more causing the trigger of tinnitus than tinnitus itself, meaning that the blast, the noise will cause hearing loss. And then your brain tries, your central auditory nervous system or your brain or your auditory brain tries to compensate for that hearing loss that you've suffered from the noise exposure. So it is within your brain. It is still in the auditory part of your brain, because if it wasn't, then it wouldn't be a sound that you would be hearing as a tinnitus. It would be something else, another sensation. It could be, for example, a phosphine in your visual field if it was in the visual system. So we know it is within the auditory system. We know it's in the auditory part of the auditory system, but where exactly and how it interacts with other system of your brain is still not completely clear.
Yeah, and that's what I meant to say. I asked that question incorrectly, but because if you're talking about, if we use stress or as a trigger, or sound as a trigger, or head concussion as a trigger, I mean, does it tie into that if someone, has there been research done if someone's doing breath work, for example, calming the vagus nerve, does that help lessen the tinnitus?
It does, and you're actually talking about a study that we've done in the lab that received funding from the CPCOE, and that I was presenting last June. So we actually did that. So the idea behind the project was that we know that we can interact with the tinnitus using sound. And we've done that in Marseille with Arnaud, trying to try the best sound that can modulate the tinnitus. We know that stress has an impact. So people either report that stress increased their tinnitus or that their tinnitus triggers stress. So which of the two? But we know that stress has an impact. So can we combine sound stimulation with relaxation that will have an effect on your stress system, your sympathetic system, by breathing at a specific pace, which is called cardiac coherence. So it's breathing at a specific pace that will have an effect on the stress response. And by combining the two, we had really nice results for veterans. And it was specifically a study on veterans with tinnitus, chronic pain, and PTSD. And one of the most striking results that we had was on sleep. Tinnitus impacts sleep a lot. It's one of the main kind of impact on the quality of life. People report that they're not able to fall asleep, or when they wake up during the night, the tinnitus makes them unable to fall asleep again or re-fall to sleep. And the impact was huge using that kind of therapy. So combining stress relaxation with the sound, people were able to improve their quality of sleep a lot. So that was kind of one of the main impact that we've seen in the study. We've seen other effect, but this one was really striking.
Yeah, because I find that interesting. Because I mean, when we, breath work and all that, I mean, calms the nervous system, which helps people sleep too. So the connections there.
Yeah.
So what about, and this might be a far reach, but what about inflammation? If the body's inflamed a lot, does that increase tinnitus as well too? Is there a connection between that and inflammation within the body?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's kind of a new approach that some researcher are trying to investigate. So there's not a lot of research about that inflammation, and mostly inflammation within the brain. So there is a few articles on animal research. So yes, there is tinnitus in humans, but so there is probably also tinnitus in animals. So if we put a rat in a cage near a loudspeaker, then we could potentially create tinnitus in that rat. And they've looked at some inflammation markers for tinnitus. So maybe there is a link, but there's still not a lot of research about inflammation. So it's really difficult to answer your question, but I think it's a field worth investigating as well.
Yeah, I was curious about that. Now, you did say you were working on different ways to help with tinnitus, and we talked about meditation being one of them. So, what else out of your research did you determine are ways to help with tinnitus?
I would say that one of the first thing, and we actually created with the CPCOE a knowledge mobilization video capsule that are online now, that started a week ago or 2 weeks ago, the beginning of February, for the tinnitus sensibilization week. And one of the things that works in almost 1 out of 2 individuals is trying to compensate for the hearing loss. So basically putting an hearing aid to compensate for the hearing loss, sometimes suppress the tinnitus while you're wearing the hearing aid. So, and the idea is that you have an hearing loss, or you're losing some frequencies, usually the high frequency, because they're more vulnerable to the effect of noise. And basically the tinnitus you're hearing is the sound of those frequency that you've lost. So if we can stimulate the inner ear enough with the hearing aid to compensate for that loss, maybe the brain will not trigger the tinnitus anymore. And it works in almost 1 out of 2 individuals. It doesn't work for everyone, but hearing aids trying to compensate for the hearing loss is one solution. For the psychological aspect that you were talking about regarding stress, regarding negative thoughts in line with tinnitus, psychological approach can help try to think of other things than tinnitus, help people to orient their attention away from the tinnitus, so it's not invading all their thoughts and their attention all the time. That's another way that can help with tinnitus. There is also the neurophysiological approach that are I would say more experimental at that stage, but people are trying, for example, to try to inhibit some signal in the brains using neuromodulator like transcranial magnetic stimulation or direct electrical stimulation. So there is that kind of approach that people are testing, which are, in my opinion, really experimental at this stage. But there is different ways that people are looking to try to tackle tinnitus. And I think that trying to separate the different subtypes is something that we should do, because one thing might work for a specific subtypes, for example, tinnitus that are linked to noise exposure, but might not work for, like you said, blast or head trauma. So there might be different treatment for different type of tinnitus.
Because you're talking about, helping with hearing aids and that, but what happens if there is no hearing loss and somebody has tinnitus?
Yeah, that's where we're trying to use sound stimulation that is not amplification. And some just to let you know as well, there is some people that are also trying to some research group that are trying to use hearing aids to compensate for minimal hearing loss. So it wouldn't be for an audiologist clinically significant, but there is still a little thing on the audiogram, and people are trying to use hearing aid to compensate for that little loss, and people see benefit. So research are going there to see maybe hearing aids might be useful even when we don't think it's clinically significant hearing loss to compensate for that loss. But there's other type of sound stimulation that can be used. There is noise generator, noise type application to try to stimulate the ear. So that's something that could be done as well, to try to help if hearing aids is not on the shelf. So some people use a white noise, pink noise, and different type of noise, or noise of a waterfall, for example. So trying to stimulate your environment and not stay in silence helps to reduce the silence of the tinnitus. It doesn't catch your attention as much when there is sounds in the room.
Yeah, and I've tried the white noise in the ear, and it just it didn't work for me. So it was more of a pain in the butt than it was to.
And that's something, if it's more a pain in the butt, then how can we make the sound not a pain in the butt? Can we use other types of sound that fits more your type of tinnitus with the frequency characteristics? So that's something we're working in the lab as well. Maybe we don't have to use white noise. A lot of people preach white noise, but maybe there's other type of noise stimulation that are more fitted for your type of tinnitus.
Yeah. And I have found, like in myself too, is that, doing breath work and that does help. Of course, being in noisy environments, if you go out for dinner or something, you come home, then and you're in a quiet area, it's more amplified. It's always there, but I guess it's just different extremes for everybody. But it's interesting how different kind of, like you talk about white noise, breath work, whatever, works for different people. And it sounds to me like with all the research that's been done, no one's been able to pinpoint exactly how to solve it. Is that correct in saying that?
Yeah, definitely. I would say you're correct. And I would say that we tend to put tinnitus in all type of tinnitus in the same box. And there's probably different types of tinnitus. There is the tinnitus type where you modulate your tinnitus by movement of your head and your jaw. And for some other people, it doesn't modulate. So does it mean that your tinnitus is different from mine? Probably. And if there's different mechanisms for your tinnitus, then we need a treatment for your type of tinnitus. Maybe it is head massage or stimulation of your face, and for somebody else, it is hearing aids. The problem is that in a lot of research on tinnitus treatment, we didn't mind if you had tinnitus, you were enrolled in the study, and then we realized that half of the people are getting better, half of the people are not getting better, and we're not really sure if it works or not, because there's probably different subtypes. It's the same thing with hearing loss. There is different type of hearing loss. If you have a plug of wax, then it's a conductive hearing loss. It's different than if you had hearing loss from a noise exposure. And you're not going to treat a wax plug the same thing as a hearing loss with the noise exposure. So basically, I think we need, as a researcher and clinician, to try to separate the different subtypes better, and then test the efficacy of specific treatment for those specific subtypes. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that's where we're moving as a researcher in tinnitus in the field.
Yeah, no, it answers it. I mean, to me, it's about learning, right? And so, I just go back to the specialist who said if anybody finds a cure for tinnitus, they'll be a billionaire. It's it's very hard to do, and he's basically was kind of saying what you're saying is, there are, the white noise, there's the hearing aids, and then there's breath work and those kind of things. So it's what each individual is going to find what works for them, but it never goes away 100%.
And specific subtypes of tinnitus that are said to be rare, but it's still debatable, is caused by a vascular malfunction of vessels near the ear. It's usually described as pulsatile tinnitus, which are synchronized with heartbeats. And there is a cure for that. The surgeons, and I've met one in Ottawa, can cure those specific subtypes of tinnitus, those specific subtypes that are caused by a vascular flow of blood that is not flowing well in the ear. But there is specific characteristic. It is usually unilateral. When you move your head, it will disappear. If you're doing exercise, it will increase. So there is a lot of characteristic for those tinnitus, but a cure exists. But when a cure exists for a specific type of tinnitus, then the problem, or I would not say the problem, but we need to organize the health services for people to detect those type of tinnitus and then to refer it to the right person. So even if we have the cure, and which I think we're going to find more and more cures for the different types of tinnitus, it's not just the cure. It's how you get it to people, how people get the services. So everything is important as well.
Well, it's interesting you bring up that vascular one. So is that have you found with patients, is that consistent, or is that on and off, that throbbing feeling that they feel in the ear?
It's usually consistent. It's not something that will go away. I don't know if I'm completely answering your question.
No,
but yeah,
it makes sense. Because I mean, for the audience to understand that, we're trying to provide some information. So, someone has it all the time, or they just have it once in a while, or is that the same thing? Or maybe they should go talk to somebody who knows, right?
But I would say if you have tinnitus or perception in your ear that you feel is not normal, then you should definitely go consult your GP, just to make sure, just to don't wait and worry too much before consulting someone.
That's great. Any as we close off here, any other thoughts or tips that you would want to pass on to people?
Maybe that one. Don't be afraid to talk about your tinnitus. Don't wait to go see someone if you're worried. Go see a specialist, go see your GP, go see audiologists, go see healthcare professionals. I think it is worth talking. Tinnitus can have an impact on your life, and go see person that can help you with that. There is solution to your tinnitus. There is support that can be provided to help you live better, hear less the perception of your tinnitus. So there is solution. Although we don't have a pill to completely remove it magically, there is things that you can do for your tinnitus.
Well, I mean, that's great. I mean, lots of good information. And, like I said, as a person who has it, it can be annoying at times. So I appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm glad to be on the show. When I was at the CPCOE in June, I had a lot of remarks on your show, how great it was. So when I was invited, I was really glad to be invited. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that feedback. And to our audience, for feedback about the show or more information on chronic pain, you can visit our website, veteranschronicpain.ca, or follow us on Facebook and X at Chronic Pain COE, and on Instagram at Chronic Pain _COE. Stay safe and keep the hope alive.
The Most Painful Podcast is produced for the Chronic Pain Center of Excellence by Story Studio Network.